Hey guys, tonight we step quietly into a medieval village, where the morning begins before the sun has properly decided to rise, where smoke curls lazily from crooked rooftops, and where your childhood is already waiting for you with a list of chores that somehow seems much longer than you are. You can hear chickens fussing outside, wooden wheels creaking somewhere along the muddy lane, and adults already moving through the dimness, because there is simply too much to do and too little daylight to waste. You pull yourself from a rough bed, rub the sleep from your eyes, and take your first look at a world that would feel strangely familiar and completely alien at the same time. And yes, before we go much further, you probably won't survive this childhood with your modern expectations intact. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're settling in, tell me your location and your local time in the comments. It's always interesting to imagine people listening from completely different corners of the world while we wander backward through history together. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Imagine that you are very small. Not small in the cute modern sense of carrying a tiny backpack to school while an adult checks whether you remembered your lunch. You are small because you have not yet had time to grow. Your hands are little, your legs are still gaining strength, and most of the world around you seems built at an inconvenient height. The doorway is too low. The wooden stool is too tall. The cooking fire looks enormous, and the adults seem to possess an endless supply of things they expect you to understand. You live somewhere in medieval Europe, perhaps in a farming village surrounded by fields, hedges, woodland, and narrow paths. The exact century matters, because medieval childhood changes considerably across hundreds of years and across different regions. There is no single medieval childhood, just as there is no single childhood today. A wealthy child in a stone castle could experience a completely different world from the child of a peasant family living in a small timber house. But for now, you are imagining an ordinary child in an ordinary household. Your home is not silent. It creaks. It smells of smoke, food, animals, damp earth, wool, wood, and whatever has been cooking recently. Depending on the season, the air might feel cold enough that leaving your blankets is a genuine negotiation with yourself. Your sleeping space may be shared with siblings or other members of the household. Privacy, as you understand it today, is not exactly one of the household's major design features. You wake because people are awake. That is one of the first differences you notice. There is no glowing screen beside you telling you that it is 7 in the morning. There is no cheerful alarm sound. There is no electric light allowing the household to ignore the natural rhythm of darkness and daylight. The day begins because the day has begun. And once everyone is moving, you are expected to move too. At first, your responsibilities are small. Perhaps you carry something that is light enough for your hands. Perhaps you watch a younger child. Perhaps you gather small pieces of fuel, help tidy part of the household, carry messages, fetch something nearby, or simply stay close enough to an adult that you can be useful when needed. You are learning constantly, even when nobody calls it learning. That is another important part of medieval childhood. There may not be a classroom waiting for you every morning. There may not be a neat timetable dividing mathematics from language arts, science from history, lunch from recess. Instead, education is often woven directly into life. You watch someone prepare food. You watch someone mend clothing. You watch an older person handle animals. You listen to adults discuss weather, crops, prices, neighbors, debts, religion, illness, and family matters. You absorb rules without realizing that you are absorbing them. Do not touch that. Carry this carefully. Stay away from the fire. Come back before dark. Do not waste food. Help your younger brother. Listen when an adult speaks. You are not simply being raised. You are being prepared. The household needs you eventually, and the earlier you become useful, the better. Yet it would be a mistake to imagine medieval children as miniature adults with no laughter, curiosity, imagination, or affection. You still get bored. You still become fascinated by strange insects. You still argue with siblings over something that seems extremely important for approximately 3 minutes. You still invent games from whatever happens to be nearby. A stick can become a sword. A scrap of cloth can become part of a costume. A small wooden object can become a treasured toy. A puddle can become an entire kingdom if you are imaginative enough. Children have always been remarkably good at turning ordinary objects into entertainment. Even in a difficult world, there are moments when childhood feels unmistakably like childhood. You laugh. You chase someone. You make up a story. You stare at an animal doing something ridiculous. You become completely absorbed in a tiny discovery that adults barely notice. And then somebody calls your name. The spell breaks. There is work to do. This rhythm, play, work, instruction, family, sleep will shape much of your early life. And beneath everything is one fact that changes the emotional landscape of childhood. People understand vulnerability differently because life itself is more uncertain. Illness is familiar. Bad harvests are possible. Food shortages can happen. Accidents happen. Families can lose members. The adults around you know this, even if you do not fully understand it yet. They may be protective, affectionate, strict, anxious, or all four within the same afternoon. You grow up surrounded by people who care about you, while also knowing that the world can be unforgiving. That does not mean medieval parents loved their children less. Quite the opposite. Historical evidence shows families forming strong emotional bonds, grieving children, celebrating births, worrying about illness, and investing enormous effort into their households. The emotional world of medieval childhood was not empty, simply because modern conveniences did not exist. What changed was the environment surrounding those emotions. Your family cannot simply solve every problem by buying something from a store. If your clothes tear, someone may repair them. If food runs low, the household must adapt. If the roof needs attention, someone has to find materials and labor. If you need a skill, someone nearby may have to teach you. Everything is more physical. Everything takes time. Everything requires somebody's hands. And as you grow, more of those hands will be yours. For now, though, you are still young. You are standing near the doorway, watching the village wake beneath a pale morning sky. Somewhere nearby, another child is being called to help. A dog moves through the lane. Smoke drifts above the rooftops. Adults begin their routines, and you have no idea how quickly your own routine will expand. The world expects very little from you at first, then a little more, then a little more again. Eventually, you will look back and realize that nobody announced the moment when childhood began to disappear. It simply happened one chore at a time. And tomorrow morning, when the light returns, there will be another task waiting. For tonight, however, you can remain here for a little longer, listening to the quiet sounds of the village, feeling the cool air, and watching the first traces of daylight spread across the fields. Your medieval childhood has begun. And before you can worry about becoming an adult, you first have to survive being a child. You are beginning to understand something important about your medieval world. Before you have chosen what you want to become, before you have even learned to imagine a future very far away, other people have already made several decisions for you. Not because someone gathered around a grand table and wrote down your destiny. It is much quieter than that. Your family's place in society, the village where you were born, the work your parents do, the land they possess or depend upon, the people they know, and even whether you are a boy or a girl, can influence what opportunities appear in front of you. You are still just a child, but medieval society is already arranging the road beneath your feet. If your family works the land, you will probably learn the land. If your father is a blacksmith, you may spend years watching sparks fly from the forge. If your family runs a workshop, you grow up surrounded by tools, materials, customers, and conversations about work. If your parents serve a wealthy household, your childhood may take place in a completely different environment. And if you are born into a noble family, you may have servants, tutors, fine clothing, better food, and access to education that most children in the surrounding countryside could only imagine. You do not choose your starting point, you inherit it. For an ordinary village child, the family is the center of almost everything. There is no separate world called home life, and another called career preparation. The two overlap almost completely. Your family is where you eat, your family is where you sleep, your family is where you learn, and your family is where you eventually become useful. The adults around you are not simply raising you for happiness. They are preparing you to function inside a household and community that depends upon cooperation. You begin with tiny responsibilities because you are tiny. Perhaps you carry messages. Perhaps you help gather fuel. Perhaps you watch animals. Perhaps you help a younger sibling. Perhaps you bring a small amount of water. None of these tasks seems particularly important when viewed individually. But together, they teach you a lesson that medieval life repeats constantly. Everyone has a role. You notice this everywhere. The farmer knows the fields. The miller knows the mill. The baker knows the oven. The carpenter knows wood. The blacksmith knows metal. The shepherd knows animals and weather. The merchant knows roads, prices, and customers. The priest knows religious texts and ceremonies. And you, slowly, begin learning whatever knowledge belongs to your household. Your education is therefore deeply connected to your social position. This does not mean that nobody ever escaped the role they were born into. Medieval society was not perfectly rigid. People moved, traded, apprenticed, entered religious institutions, married into different households, traveled, and sometimes improved their circumstances. But your starting position mattered enormously. Imagine two children waking on the same morning. One lives in a wealthy manor. The other lives in a small rural cottage. The first may have access to better clothing, more varied food, servants, books, formal instruction, and protection. The second may have almost none of these things. Yet both children can be curious. Both can be mischievous. Both can become frightened by thunderstorms. Both can become attached to animals. Both can complain when asked to work. That last part, fortunately, seems to be a universal feature of childhood. The difference is not whether children have feelings. The difference is the environment in which those feelings develop. If you are born into a noble household, adults may begin thinking about your future very early. Your education can be deliberately planned. You may learn religious instruction, manners, reading, writing, music, writing, languages, or skills considered appropriate to your social position. You are surrounded by people whose work is specifically connected to preparing you for adulthood. You might have a tutor. You might learn from a household official. You might spend time observing adults who manage property, servants, ceremonies, or political relationships. Your childhood still contains games and friendships, but there is an unmistakable expectation behind it. You are being prepared to represent your family. If you are born into a peasant household, preparation looks different. There may be no tutor. There may be no quiet study room. Instead, your teachers are your parents, grandparents, older siblings, neighbors, craftsmen, farmers, and anyone else who knows something you need to learn. You learn by doing. You watch. You copy. You make mistakes. You are corrected. You try again. If you are old enough to carry something, you carry it. If you are old enough to watch an animal, you watch it. If you are old enough to help with food preparation, you help. If you are old enough to understand a tool, someone may place it in your hands. The process is gradual. Nobody necessarily says, "Congratulations, today you have officially entered vocational training." Instead, one day you simply realize that you know how to do something. And then people expect you to do it. This is one of the strange things about growing up in a pre-modern society. Knowledge is often practical. You learn things because someone needs them done. You know which plants are useful. You learn how to recognize an animal that is behaving strangely. You learn how to handle basic household equipment. You learn which paths become difficult after rain. You learn how weather affects crops. You learn how to behave around people with greater social authority. And you learn the countless small rules that make village life function. Some of these rules are spoken, many are not. You simply observe them. You notice who speaks first. You notice who receives respect. You notice who can enter certain spaces. You notice which adults seem powerful and which seem vulnerable. You begin to understand that medieval society is full of invisible boundaries. A wealthy person can move through the village differently from a poor laborer. A landowner has choices that a tenant may not have. A craftsman possesses knowledge that outsiders do not. A religious official may command a kind of respect that ordinary villagers cannot expect. And you are watching all of this before you fully understand why. You learn how to recognize an animal that is behaving strangely. You learn how to handle basic household equipment. You learn which paths become difficult after rain. You learn how weather affects crops. You learn how to behave around people with greater social authority. And you learn the countless small rules that make village life function. Some of these rules are spoken, many are not. You simply observe them. You notice who speaks first. You notice who receives respect. You notice who can enter certain spaces. You notice which adults seem powerful and which seem vulnerable. You begin to understand that medieval society is full of invisible boundaries. A wealthy person can move through the village differently from a poor laborer. A landowner has choices that a tenant may not have. A craftsman possesses knowledge that outsiders do not. A religious official may command a kind of respect that ordinary villagers cannot expect. And you are watching all of this before you fully understand why. Your place is also shaped by geography. A child growing up near a river may know boats, fishing, flooding, and river trade. A child in a farming village may know planting and harvest rhythms. A child in a busy town may become familiar with merchants, workshops, markets, animals, travelers, and crowded streets. A child near a castle might regularly see soldiers, servants, officials, and visitors. The medieval world is not one landscape. It is thousands of small worlds connected by roads, rivers, markets, religious institutions, and trade. Your birthplace determines which of those worlds you know first. And then there is family size. If you have several siblings, your household can feel like a small community of its own. Older children may help younger ones. Younger children watch older children and imitate them. Arguments happen. Games happen. Competition happens. Affection happens. Someone always seems to be asking where something went. And because space is limited, everyone learns to live around everyone else. Privacy remains a luxury. If you are the oldest child, adults may expect more from you. You may be trusted with responsibilities earlier. You may help care for younger siblings. If you are younger, you might spend years following older brothers and sisters around, trying to copy what they can already do. Your position within the family, therefore, matters too. Even your future may be influenced by birth order, inheritance customs, family resources, and the needs of the household. You do not yet know all of this. You simply notice that adults treat children differently. One child gets trusted with an important task. Another is told to stay out of the way. An older sibling is allowed to go farther. A younger one is kept closer to home. The differences gradually make sense. You are learning the structure of society without ever seeing a diagram of it. And perhaps that is the most remarkable part. Nobody needs to hand you a textbook explaining medieval social organization. You live inside it. You breathe it. You watch it every day. You understand that some people have more. Some have less. Some command. Some obey. Some own. Some rent. Some work with their hands. Some work with words. Some work with weapons. Some work with prayer. And almost everyone depends on someone else. Even the wealthiest household requires countless people to function. Food must arrive. Clothing must be made. Animals must be cared for. Buildings must be maintained. Messages must travel. Fields must be worked. Tools must be repaired. Your medieval world is therefore not simply divided into rich and poor. It is an enormous network of relationships. And you are already part of it. As evening comes, you return to your family's home. You may not understand taxes, inheritance, land rights, obligations, or social hierarchy. You only know that tomorrow you will wake up here again. The same walls, the same people, the same village, and probably another task waiting for you. Your future has not been completely decided, but its first chapter has been written by the circumstances into which you were born. And now, as you drift toward sleep beneath your rough wool blanket, you can begin to imagine how strange it must be to grow up in a world where the question is rarely, what do you want to be when you grow up? Instead, the question is much simpler. What does your family need you to become? The first years of your life are the quietest years in one sense, and the most uncertain in another. You do not remember much of them. Perhaps you remember warmth, a familiar voice, the smell of smoke from the hearth, the feeling of being carried, the sound of older children arguing somewhere nearby. But the adults around you remember everything. They remember when you were born. They remember how small you were. They remember every cough that made them nervous, every night when you would not sleep, every time you seemed unusually quiet. And in a medieval household, those memories can carry a particular weight. Childhood is precious, but everyone knows it can also be fragile. You are born into a world without modern hospitals, antibiotics, vaccinations, or the countless layers of medical support that surround children today. That does not mean medieval people were careless. They were not. Parents and relatives watched children closely. They knew the normal behavior of their babies. They noticed changes. They tried traditional remedies. They sought help from experienced women, healers, physicians, religious institutions, or anyone believed to possess useful knowledge. They cared. They worried. They hoped. But there were limits to what anyone could do. Those limits are part of the background of your childhood. As a baby, you are almost entirely dependent on other people. Someone must feed you. Someone must keep you warm. Someone must clean you. Someone must carry you. Someone must notice when something is wrong. And someone must stay awake when you are restless in the night. Your mother may be the person most closely associated with your care, but she is not necessarily doing everything alone. Grandmothers, older sisters, relatives, neighbors, and other members of the household may help. A medieval community can be surprisingly interconnected. People know each other. They know who has recently had a baby. They know whose child is sick. They know which household is struggling. They know which woman has experience helping mothers. Information travels by conversation rather than messages appearing on a screen. You may grow up surrounded by people who know your family almost as well as you do. Your earliest clothing is practical. Soft fabric, simple wrapping, perhaps wool when warmth is needed. Nothing is designed merely for fashion. Clothing is valuable because producing fabric requires enormous amounts of labor. Someone has to raise animals or grow fibers. Someone has to process the material. Someone has to spin it. Someone has to weave it. Someone has to cut and sew it. So even a baby's clothing represents work. You may be wrapped carefully against the cold. The cottage itself provides protection, but it is not a modern nursery. There is no separate climate-controlled room waiting for you. The same household may contain sleeping spaces, cooking areas, tools, animals, and people engaged in different activities. Smoke can hang in the air. Floors may be made from packed earth or rough boards. Walls may be constructed from timber, wattle, plaster, or other local materials. The environment is practical rather than luxurious. And yet, somehow, this becomes normal. You learn the smells of your home. You learn the voices of your family. You learn which footsteps belong to which person. You learn the sound of the door opening. You learn the sound of rain against the roof. You learn the difference between ordinary household noise and something that makes adults suddenly become quiet. As you begin crawling and walking, your world expands. At first, every object seems fascinating. A wooden spoon, a basket, a piece of cloth, a cup, a pebble, a feather. You pick things up. You drop them. You put them somewhere inconvenient. Someone retrieves them. You do it again. There is something wonderfully universal about this. The medieval world may look ancient to us, but a small child investigating everything within reach is still a small child. You are curious. You do not understand why some things are dangerous. The cooking fire is beautiful. You want to get closer. An adult moves you away. You protest. The adult insists. The lesson is repeated. Stay away from the fire. You learn eventually, not because someone gives you a written safety manual, but because the world itself teaches you through repetition and supervision. As you grow stronger, you begin following people around. You watch your mother or another adult prepare food. You watch your father or another household member work. You watch older children complete tasks that seem impossibly difficult, and you imitate them. This is how much of your education begins. You copy. If an older sibling carries something a certain way, you try it. If someone gathers wood in a particular place, you follow. If someone handles an animal carefully, you observe the movements. If someone kneads dough, you watch the rhythm. You are learning long before anyone calls it education. But there is another thing you are learning too. You are learning that adults are vulnerable. When an adult becomes sick, the entire household may change its routine. Someone must do that person's work. Someone must bring food. Someone must care for them. Someone may need to call for help. As a child, you may not understand the cause of illness, but you understand its consequences. A busy room becomes quiet. An ordinary face becomes worried. A familiar person stays in bed. The household feels different. These experiences teach you something about the world long before you can explain it. People can become weak. Plans can change. The future is never completely predictable. This uncertainty does not mean every medieval family lived in constant terror. That would be too simple. Most days are ordinary. That is important. You wake up. You eat. You help. You play. You hear stories. You get tired. You sleep. There are jokes. There are celebrations. There are birthdays and religious festivals. There are family gatherings. There are moments when adults laugh at something you have done. There are moments when you become the center of attention because you have learned a new word or taken your first steps. The ordinary parts of childhood matter. History often focuses on kings, battles, famines, and disasters because those events leave dramatic records. But most children did not spend every day experiencing dramatic events. Most days were filled with small things. And small things are what build a life. You may have a favorite person in the household, perhaps an older sibling who lets you follow them, perhaps a grandmother who tells stories, perhaps a parent whose voice makes you feel safe, perhaps a neighbor who gives you a piece of food or a simple handmade toy. Affection exists even when life is difficult. A rough blanket can still feel comforting. A warm bowl of food can still feel wonderful. A familiar song can still calm you. A parent can still smile when you finally learn to walk. Human beings do not need modern technology to form attachments. That part of childhood has not changed very much. What changes is the level of uncertainty surrounding it. As you move beyond infancy, adults begin to relax slightly. You can walk. You can communicate. You can feed yourself. You can follow instructions. You can stay near the household without constant carrying. And that is when something else begins. Your childhood starts becoming useful. At first, the tasks are tiny. Then they become slightly larger. You may be asked to fetch something, then carry something, then watch something, then help someone. Each new responsibility feels ordinary. Nobody announces that you have crossed a boundary, but slowly, you are moving from being the child who must be cared for toward becoming the child who can help care for the household. This transition can happen differently depending on family, wealth, location, and circumstances. A wealthy child may have more time for formal education and leisure. A poorer child may begin helping earlier. A child in a busy town may spend more time around workshops and markets. A child in the countryside may spend more time among fields and animals. Your environment shapes your childhood. Still, wherever you are, one truth remains. You are growing. Your arms are getting stronger. Your legs are getting longer. Your curiosity is becoming more focused. And adults are beginning to look at you differently. You are still their child, but now they are starting to see the person you might become. Tomorrow, they may ask you to do something slightly more difficult, and you will probably try, because that is how your medieval childhood advances, not with a ceremony, not with a birthday party announcing that everything has changed, just one small responsibility after another, one morning at a time. One lesson at a time, one ordinary day quietly carrying you toward the next stage of your life. By now, you have discovered that simply being alive is not enough to keep you occupied. There is always something to learn. A word, a gesture, a household rule, a way of carrying something, a way of speaking to an older person, a way of recognizing when an animal is nervous, a way of knowing whether the sky looks friendly or threatening. You are learning constantly, although nobody has handed you a timetable and announced that lessons begin at 9. Your school, if we can call it that, is the entire world around you. You learn first by listening. Words matter. Adults speak differently around children than they speak around one another, but you still hear far more than anyone realizes. You hear names. You hear instructions. You hear jokes. You hear arguments. You hear prayers. You hear stories about relatives you have never met. You hear warnings about places you should not go. And gradually, the sounds become meaningful. At first, A word may be nothing more than a sound. Then you understand what it means. Eventually, you can say it yourself. This is one of the great milestones of childhood in any century. You discover that sounds can represent things: a person, an animal, a tool, a meal, a place, an action. And once you understand language, your world becomes much larger. Adults can finally explain things to you. You can ask questions. You can argue. You can make excuses. You can tell stories. And, unfortunately for the adults, you can also repeat things you were absolutely not supposed to repeat. Your memory becomes useful too. You begin remembering instructions. Perhaps an adult tells you where to put something. You remember. Someone shows you a particular route. You remember. An older sibling explains how to recognize a particular animal. You remember. This is practical education. There is little separation between knowledge and survival. If you learn something useful, it immediately has a purpose. One of your earliest lessons may be simple manners. You learn how to greet people, how to behave around elders, when to remain quiet, when to speak, how to behave during religious activities, how to treat visitors, how to behave around people who possess more authority than your family. These rules can feel mysterious. Why does one person receive a polite greeting while another receives something more casual? Why must you stand a certain way? Why are some rooms restricted? Why can some adults tell you what to do without discussion? You may not understand the social structure completely, but you learn how to navigate it. And that is valuable. Your family does not want you accidentally offending someone important. Medieval communities are close. People know one another. Reputations matter. Your behavior can reflect on your family. So adults teach you how to behave in public. They may correct your posture, your words, your tone, your manners, sometimes gently, sometimes not so gently. You are also learning religion. For many medieval communities, religious belief is not simply something that happens once a week. It is woven into the calendar, the household, celebrations, funerals, festivals, prayers, and explanations of the world. You may hear prayers before meals. You may attend religious services. You may learn stories about saints and biblical figures. You may see religious symbols in homes and public spaces. You may hear adults explaining events through religious ideas. The boundary between everyday life and religious life is much less obvious than it is in many modern settings. You learn what is considered right, what is considered wrong, what behavior is praised, what behavior is condemned. You learn traditions before you are old enough to question them. But your education is not only about religion and manners. You are also learning the physical world. And the physical world demands attention. If you live in a farming community, you begin recognizing seasons. Spring means certain tasks. Summer means others. Autumn brings harvest. Winter changes the rhythm of everything. You learn that weather is not simply something you check before deciding what jacket to wear. Weather can determine whether your family has enough food. A long period of rain can damage crops. A dry season can create problems. A harsh winter can make travel difficult. A storm can destroy property. So adults watch the sky. And you learn to watch it too. You begin noticing clouds, wind, temperature, soil, the condition of plants, the behavior of animals. You learn through observation, because observation is useful. Animals become another part of your education. A goat is not simply a goat. You learn which animal is calm, which one is stubborn, which one is likely to wander, which one needs attention. You learn how to approach animals, how to feed them, how to keep them where they belong. And if you make a mistake, an adult corrects you quickly. You also learn tools, not necessarily complicated ones. A small knife, a wooden spoon, a basket, a rope, a simple farming implement, a needle, a hammer. The tools depend on your household. You do not immediately receive responsibility for the most dangerous or valuable equipment. Instead, you begin with things you can manage. Someone shows you. You watch. You try. You fail. You try again. This repetition slowly turns unfamiliar movements into habits. There is no printed instruction manual. The knowledge exists in people's hands. An older person knows how to perform a task because someone once taught them. Now they teach you. This creates a chain connecting generations. Your hands are learning what your parents' hands learned. And someday, if everything goes as expected, you will teach someone else. This is particularly important in craft households. Imagine growing up in a workshop. The sounds of work surround you. Wood being cut, metal being shaped, leather being handled, cloth being measured. Depending on the trade, you may begin recognizing materials long before you are trusted to work with them. You watch, you listen, you become familiar with the rhythm. An older craftsman might correct your grip. An apprentice might show you a technique. Eventually, you begin doing small parts of the process. Your childhood becomes a gradual apprenticeship. For some children, formal schooling does exist, but it is not equally available to everyone. Some children, especially those connected to religious institutions or wealthy households, may receive more structured education. They might learn reading, writing, religious texts, Latin, music, or other subjects depending on the period and institution. For most ordinary children, however, education remains heavily practical. This does not mean they are unintelligent. It means the knowledge considered most useful for their lives is different. A child who cannot read may still know exactly when a field needs attention. They may understand animals, weather, tools, trade, local geography, household production, community customs. Their knowledge simply does not fit neatly inside a modern school report card. You are discovering that learning is everywhere. You learn while walking, while cooking, while playing, while helping, while listening. Even mistakes become lessons. You spill something. You break something. You forget an instruction. You wander somewhere you should not. An adult calls you back. You learn. Sometimes the lesson is embarrassing. Sometimes funny. Sometimes frustrating. But the next time you remember. And gradually, people trust you with more. That is the quiet reward of childhood competence. At first, someone watches everything you do. Then they watch less. Then they simply tell you what needs to be done. And eventually, they expect you to remember without being told. That transition is almost invisible. One day you realize you have become the child who knows where things are kept. You know which animal belongs to which household. You know which path leads to the well. You know how to carry a basket. You know how to behave around visitors. You know what time of day certain tasks happen. You know when an adult is joking and when they are serious. You are becoming part of the household's rhythm. And perhaps that is what medieval education really feels like from inside. Not a classroom, not a textbook, not a neat list of subjects. A long, continuous process of watching the world and slowly learning how to belong inside it. The sun is setting now. You return home with dust on your clothes and another collection of small lessons stored somewhere in your memory. Tomorrow, there will be more. A new task, a new instruction, a new mistake, a new thing to understand. And without realizing it, you are preparing for a future that is already getting closer. You have learned enough now that the adults around you no longer see you as someone who must simply be kept safe. You are becoming useful. It happens quietly. One morning, someone hands you a basket. Another day, you are asked to carry a small bundle. Then someone tells you to watch the chickens. Later, you are trusted to bring something from one part of the village to another. None of these tasks feels like a grand entrance into the world of work, but together, they mark an important change. Your days are becoming organized around responsibility. The medieval household does not have an endless supply of spare hands. Every person who can contribute matters. That does not mean you are expected to perform an adult's workload immediately. You are still growing. Your strength is limited. Your attention wanders. You get tired. You make mistakes. Adults understand this, at least to some extent, but they also understand that skills take time to develop, so they start teaching you early. The first jobs are usually simple. You might gather small pieces of wood. You might carry light objects. You might help with food preparation. You might watch younger children. You might collect eggs. You might help with animals. You might assist an older family member. The work changes with the household. There is no universal list of medieval childhood chores. A farming family needs different help from a craft family. A household in a town is different from one in the countryside. A wealthy family has servants and specialized workers. A poor household may depend heavily on every available family member. Your circumstances determine what lands in your hands. Imagine a summer morning. The sun is already climbing when you leave the cottage. The fields are bright. The air smells of grass, soil, and animals. Adults are already working. You are given a small basket. Your instructions are simple. Take this there. Bring that back. Stay where you can be seen. You nod. You walk away feeling strangely important. The basket is not heavy. The distance is not far, but someone has trusted you to complete a task. That changes how you see yourself. You are no longer merely following. You are participating. And participation feels good, at least until you discover that chores are repetitive. Very repetitive. The first time you collect something, it may feel like an adventure. The 10th time, less so. The 100th time, you may begin wondering whether the universe has personally decided to punish you. Unfortunately, the universe has not. There is simply work. And medieval life contains an enormous amount of repetitive work. Food must be prepared again tomorrow. Animals must be fed again tomorrow. Water must be collected again tomorrow. Tools must be cleaned again. Clothes must be repaired again. Floors must be maintained. Fuel must be gathered. The rhythm continues. This repetition is actually part of your education. You learn patience. You learn consistency. You learn that finishing a task matters, even when the task is boring. You also learn that mistakes have consequences. Suppose you are carrying a basket and forget to secure it properly. Something falls out. You stop. You pick it up. Someone tells you to be more careful. Next time, you remember. Or perhaps you are supposed to watch a group of chickens. You become distracted. One wanders away. Now you have to find it. You learn that responsibility means paying attention, even when nothing exciting is happening. This is a lesson that adults everywhere would probably like to teach children. The medieval version simply comes with more chickens. As you grow older, the tasks become more physically demanding. You may carry larger loads. You may help in the fields. You may assist with harvesting. You may help with animals. You may perform household tasks that require greater coordination. If you are a girl, your expected work may increasingly center around food preparation, spinning, sewing, cleaning, childcare, and other household or craft activities, though the exact division of work varies widely by household and region. If you are a boy, you may increasingly be directed toward agricultural work, animal care, craft work, or other tasks associated with your family and community. But these boundaries are not absolute. Children's work overlaps. Families need help wherever it is needed. A boy may help with domestic chores. A girl may work in fields or alongside family members. Economic necessity often matters more than neat categories. And in a medieval household, necessity is a powerful teacher. You learn to work with the seasons. During harvest, the atmosphere changes. There is urgency. Crops cannot simply wait forever. Everyone who can help may become involved. You see adults moving through fields. Bundles of grain appear. Baskets fill. Animals are managed. Food must be processed and stored. The work continues through long days. You may not understand the larger economic importance of the harvest, but you understand something simpler. Everyone is busy, and you are expected to help. Your contribution may be small compared with an adult's, but small contributions add up. A household is built from thousands of such actions. Someone gathers. Someone carries. Someone cooks. Someone repairs. Someone cleans. Someone watches. Someone stores. Someone plans. You are learning how these pieces fit together. You are also learning the value of tools. A good tool saves time. A broken tool creates problems. A lost tool causes frustration. A damaged tool may need repair. You begin to understand that objects are not disposable. Everything has a history of labor behind it. A wooden bucket required a craftsperson. A metal knife required a smith. A wool garment required many stages of work. A basket required skill. Because replacing things is difficult and expensive, people take care of what they have. You are taught not to waste, not food, not fabric, not firewood, not tools, not time. This practical attitude becomes part of your worldview. Even play can use leftover materials. A piece of wood becomes a toy. A scrap of cloth becomes part of a game. A simple ball or handmade object can provide entertainment. You do not need a room filled with manufactured toys because you are accustomed to creating things yourself. Your imagination fills the gaps, but eventually, work catches up with play. You may be playing outside when someone calls you. You hear your name. You already know what it means. Time to come back. You sigh. Your friend laughs. You put down your toy. And you return. This small moment happens again and again. Childhood and work are not completely separate worlds. They overlap. You may work for a while, play for a while, then work again. A child might spend part of the day helping with a household task and another part playing with other children. The balance depends on age, family circumstances, season, and local customs. There are also days when work becomes more serious because circumstances demand it. If a family is short of labor, children may have to contribute more. If a parent becomes ill, older children may take on additional responsibilities. If money is scarce, children may need to contribute to household production. If the family runs a craft business, children may become involved in that work. Your childhood therefore depends heavily on the stability of your household. For a comfortable family, childhood may remain relatively protected for longer. For a struggling family, responsibility may arrive earlier. You begin to see why medieval childhood cannot be described with one simple picture. Some children lived in hardship. Others lived in relative comfort. Some had access to education. Others learned entirely through work. Some lived surrounded by siblings. Others may have had very different family circumstances. Some lived in busy towns. Others rarely traveled beyond their village. Yet across these differences, you are gradually moving toward the same destination. Adulthood. You do not hurry toward it consciously. You simply keep learning. The basket becomes heavier. The task becomes more complicated. The instructions become longer. The adults supervise you less. And one day, you notice something surprising. Someone younger is watching you. They are copying what you do. You have become the older child, the one who knows where the basket belongs, the one who knows which path to take, the one who can explain a simple task. You may still feel like a child, but someone else is beginning to learn from you. That is how knowledge moves through the medieval household. From parent to child, from older sibling to younger sibling, from craftsman to apprentice, from neighbor to neighbor. And now some of it is moving through you. The sun is lowering again. Your hands are dusty. Your clothes smell faintly of animals, smoke, and earth. You return to the cottage. There is food waiting. There is conversation. There is warmth. And tomorrow, there will be work again. You may not love every minute of it. Honestly, nobody has ever loved every chore. But slowly the work is teaching you something. You are learning how to make yourself useful. And in your medieval world, usefulness is one of the clearest signs that childhood is beginning to give way to something else. There is another possibility waiting somewhere beyond the village lane. A school. You have heard about places where children sit together and learn letters from marks on parchment, where an educated teacher speaks about religious texts, where books are treated almost like precious objects. But whether you ever see such a place depends on who you are, where you live, and what your family can afford. For you, formal schooling is not guaranteed. It is a possibility. And that makes it feel almost mysterious. Most mornings, your education still happens at home. You learn from parents. You learn from older siblings. You learn from neighbors. You learn from craftsmen. You learn from watching the world. But sometimes you pass the village church and see someone reading. The sight catches your attention. You cannot understand the marks yet. They look strange. Tiny shapes arranged in lines. You wonder how anyone can look at those shapes and know what they mean. To you, writing seems almost magical. A spoken sentence disappears into the air. A written sentence stays. Someone can write something today, and another person can read it later. That idea is extraordinary when you first encounter it. But books are expensive. Making a book is not like printing hundreds of identical copies in a factory. A manuscript may require prepared animal skin or another writing surface, careful writing, ink, and enormous amounts of labor. A single book can represent months or even years of work. So books are valuable, very valuable. You may see one in a church. You may see one in a monastery. You may see one in the household of a wealthy person. You may not be allowed to touch it. That makes your curiosity even stronger. You wonder what is inside. If you are lucky, someone may begin teaching you. Perhaps a religious institution provides basic instruction. Perhaps your family has enough status or money to arrange a tutor. Perhaps an educated relative teaches you. The experience is completely different from your usual routine. Instead of learning while carrying a basket, you are expected to sit. Instead of watching someone work, you are expected to concentrate on marks. You may begin with letters, simple shapes, repeated sounds, small steps. The teacher may speak slowly. You repeat. You make mistakes. You try again. Your first attempts at writing are unlikely to look elegant. Your hand is still learning control. The writing surface is valuable. You must be careful. There is no endless stack of cheap paper waiting beside you. Every mistake has a cost. This makes learning to write feel physical. Your fingers hurt. Your attention wanders. You look outside. Someone is playing in the street. You wonder why you are sitting here when the sun is shining. The teacher looks at you. You look back. You return to the lesson. This is perhaps the earliest version of the universal childhood experience of staring longingly out a classroom window. Some things apparently never change. If your education takes place through a religious institution, much of what you learn may be connected to religion. You might learn prayers. You might memorize passages. You might learn basic reading. Depending on the institution and your circumstances, you may encounter Latin, which was especially important in Western European religious and scholarly settings. But even then, education is not identical everywhere. Medieval Europe covers centuries and many regions. Schools vary. Teachers vary. Access varies. Some children receive very little formal instruction. Others receive a great deal. Your social position matters. Your family's ambitions matter. Your location matters. And sometimes, sheer luck matters. Imagine that your parents decide education is worth pursuing. They may see reading as useful. Perhaps they hope you will enter a religious institution. Perhaps they want you to work in administration. Perhaps a local school happens to be available. Perhaps an educated person is willing to teach you. Suddenly, your childhood takes a slightly different path. Your mornings may include lessons, but your afternoons still belong to ordinary life. You still eat. You still help. You still play. You still live in the same world. Formal education does not erase practical education. Even a child who learns to read may still need to understand household work. And even a child who never learns to read may possess extraordinary practical knowledge. This is important because modern people can easily assume that literacy equals intelligence. History does not support such a simple equation. Knowledge comes in many forms. A farmer can understand soil. A shepherd can understand animals. A carpenter can understand wood. A weaver can understand thread and tension. A sailor can understand wind and water. A merchant can understand weights, prices, and negotiation. A healer can recognize symptoms. A child can know the entire local landscape without ever reading a map. These forms of knowledge are real. They simply are not stored in books. You begin to appreciate this as you grow. You may know exactly where to find a particular plant. You may know which neighbor owns which animals. You may know which path becomes muddy after rain. You may know where older children gather to play. You may know how to carry a basket without spilling its contents. These are lessons too. Sometimes the most valuable lessons are the ones you never realize you are learning. Still, formal schooling has its own attractions. You want to know what those mysterious marks mean. You want to understand the books adults treat with such seriousness. You want to be able to read a name. Perhaps you want to write your own. That possibility can feel powerful. Imagine the first time you recognize a familiar word on a page. You know the sound. You know the meaning. And suddenly the marks are no longer mysterious. They speak to you. You have crossed a tiny bridge into another world. For a child living in a society where many people do not read fluently, that ability can be significant. But formal education also has limitations. It can be difficult to reach. Travel may be inconvenient. Lessons may cost money or require family support. Your household may need your labor. If you spend several hours studying, someone else may have to perform the work you would normally do. For a poor family, that is not a small decision. Every hour has value. Every pair of hands matters. So your parents may have to balance education against necessity. The decision is not simply, would you like to go to school? It is also, can the household afford the time? That question shapes many childhoods. And if you are a girl, access to formal education may be even more restricted in many communities, although some girls and women absolutely did receive education, especially in noble urban or religious settings. The medieval world contains exceptions everywhere. That is why it is dangerous to imagine every child living the same life. Your experience depends on the particular corner of the medieval world you inhabit. Perhaps you have no school at all. Perhaps you occasionally receive lessons. Perhaps you become deeply involved in religious education. Perhaps you enter an apprenticeship later and learn through work. There are many paths. For now, though, you are still young enough to move between them. You spend one day helping your family, another day listening to a teacher, another day playing with friends, another day watching a craftsman. Your education is becoming a patchwork. A little from books, a little from people, a little from mistakes, a little from experience. And perhaps that is the best way to understand medieval learning. It is not an empty space where modern schooling should be. It is a different system built around the needs of a different society. You learn what your world asks you to know, and slowly those lessons make you more capable. The letters begin to make sense. The household tasks become easier. The village paths become familiar. The tools become less mysterious. The adults trust you more, and once again, you find yourself standing at the edge of another change. Because the more you learn, the more useful you become. And the more useful you become, the closer adulthood feels. For tonight, though, the lesson is over. The parchment is put away. The tools are returned. The sun is fading beyond the fields. You step outside and breathe the cool evening air. For a moment, you are simply a child again. No letters, no chores, no expectations. Just the fading light, the sound of the village, and the possibility of running off to play. The village is beginning to feel smaller. Not because the houses have moved closer together. Because you know more of it now. You know the path to the well. You know where the animals are kept. You know which house belongs to which family. You know where the market appears on busy days. You know the church bells. You know the sounds of workshops. You know which adults are friendly and which ones prefer children to stay out of their way. Most importantly, you are beginning to understand that your village is connected to a much larger world. Goods arrive from elsewhere. Travelers pass through. Merchants bring unfamiliar objects. Stories arrive with strangers. And sometimes, news travels faster than you expect. You may not know how far away the next town is, but you know it exists. Someone has been there. Someone has returned from there. Someone has told a story about it. To you, this makes the world feel enormous. Yet your daily life remains close to home. The market is one of the places where the wider world becomes visible. On market days, the quiet rhythm changes. More people appear. Stalls are arranged. Animals are brought in. Baskets of food are displayed. Cloth, tools, pottery, salt, grain, leather goods, and other products may change hands depending on the place and period. You are fascinated, not because you understand economics. You are fascinated because there are so many things to look at. Different voices, different clothes, different smells, different accents, different faces. The market is noisy. People negotiate. Animals make their own contributions to the conversation. Children move around the edges. Adults warn you not to get in the way. Naturally, you immediately want to get in the way. You are curious. You want to touch everything. Someone sells a small wooden object. You stare at it. Someone displays colorful cloth. You look at that too. A merchant opens a container and reveals unfamiliar spices. The smell catches your attention. You have never smelled anything quite like it. Suddenly the world feels larger. The market also teaches you about value. You begin noticing that adults do not simply exchange everything freely. They compare, they measure, they bargain. A certain amount of grain is worth something. A piece of cloth has another value. A tool may be expensive because it requires skilled labor. Salt may be valuable because it is useful and not equally available everywhere. You do not understand the calculations yet, but you understand the basic idea. Things have value because people need them, and because producing or obtaining them requires work. That lesson will stay with you. You may even begin playing at trade with other children. A pebble becomes a coin, a stick becomes a tool. A handful of leaves becomes valuable merchandise. You invent prices. You negotiate. You exchange. Then you change the rules halfway through because apparently you are both merchant and government. Your games imitate the adult world without actually reproducing its complexity. But through play, you begin practicing negotiation. You learn that if you want something, you may have to offer something else. You learn that people can disagree about value. You learn that not every deal works, and sometimes you discover that your friend has absolutely no intention of accepting your magnificent collection of pebbles in exchange for their wooden toy. The lesson is painful. The medieval economy continues without you. Meanwhile, your family has its own concerns. Food remains important. What you eat depends heavily on location, season, wealth, and availability. Bread or other grains may form an important part of the diet in many European communities. Vegetables, legumes, dairy products, eggs, fish, or meat may appear depending on circumstances. Preserving food matters. Storage matters. Waste matters. You begin to recognize the rhythms of food preparation. You know when dough is being made. You know when a pot is being prepared. You know when something smells particularly good. And you learn that good food does not simply appear. Someone worked for it. The grain had to be grown, harvested, processed, stored, ground, prepared, cooked. Even the simplest meal represents many steps. As a child, you may not think about all those stages. You simply think dinner smells wonderful. That is enough. You also begin to understand scarcity. Some foods are common at certain times and rare at others. Fresh produce may depend on the season. Meat may not appear equally often in every household. A wealthy family can have greater variety. A poor family may rely heavily on basic staples. A bad harvest can affect everyone. And this is where the adult world begins pressing more heavily against your childhood. You may overhear conversations about prices, about harvests, about shortages, about debts, about whether the household has enough supplies. You do not understand every word, but you understand the tone. Adults become more serious. A full storage room makes people relaxed. An empty one makes them worried. You learn that food is not just something you eat. It is security. It is planning. It is survival. This may be one of the earliest economic lessons you ever receive. You also learn about clothing. A new garment is not something purchased casually. Cloth represents labor. So clothes are repaired, patched, adjusted, passed down. If an older sibling outgrows something, you may receive it. The garment may already have signs of use. A repaired seam, a faded patch, a slightly uneven edge. But it still works. You are taught not to waste good material. If something can be repaired, repair it. If it can be reused, reuse it. If it can be transformed into something else, transform it. This practical attitude shapes your childhood. You begin seeing value in objects differently. A broken piece of wood is not necessarily rubbish. A scrap of cloth might become useful. An old basket can be repaired. A worn garment can be patched. Nothing is automatically disposable. This also means your possessions are usually few. Your toys, if you have them, may be simple. A carved wooden figure, a ball, a spinning object, a doll, a handmade game. Sometimes the best toy is simply a stick. And you can turn a stick into nearly anything. A sword, a staff, a horse, a fishing rod, a magical weapon, a royal scepter. The possibilities are endless. The stick, of course, remains a stick. But your imagination does not care. Playing with other children gives you another kind of education. You learn cooperation, competition, rules, cheating, negotiation, apologies. Occasionally, dramatic declarations that you are never playing with that person again. 5 minutes later, you are playing again. Children create their own social world. Adults may supervise from a distance, but much of the interaction belongs to you. You learn who is generous, who is bossy, who is funny, who is trustworthy, who is likely to invent completely new rules when losing. You learn friendship, and you learn conflict. Not every disagreement is serious. Most are ordinary childhood arguments, but they teach you how to negotiate relationships. You are discovering that your community is made of people, not just buildings. Every person has a reputation. Every family has relationships. Every household has its own circumstances. You begin remembering who owes whom a favor, who is related to whom, who works with whom, who is new, who has traveled, who has influence. You are learning social geography, and it matters because your medieval world is intensely local. You may rarely travel far, so the people around you form most of your known universe. That makes community important. Neighbors may help during difficult times. They may share information. They may lend tools. They may assist during important events. They may also argue. Communities are not always peaceful. People disagree about land, money, work, property, responsibilities. But despite conflicts, people remain connected. You are growing up inside that network, and slowly you begin to understand that your future will depend partly on where you fit within it. Who knows your family? Who trusts you? What can you do? What work can you learn? What relationships will you build? You do not have answers yet. You are still young. For now, you are simply watching, listening, remembering, learning. The market begins to empty as evening approaches. Stalls disappear. Animals are led home. Merchants pack their goods. The noise fades. You walk back toward your cottage beside your family. The village becomes quiet again, but the world does not feel quite as small as it did yesterday. You have seen people from elsewhere. You have heard unfamiliar stories. You have touched objects made by hands you will never meet. And for the first time, perhaps, you understand something important. Your childhood may be happening in one tiny village, but the world around it is much bigger. The older you become, the more you notice that adults are always preparing for something. A harvest, a winter, a wedding, a journey, a feast, a repair, a religious festival, a difficult season. There is always something waiting beyond the next few days. You begin to understand that medieval life is built around preparation, because there is very little room for simply assuming everything will work out. Food must be stored before winter. Clothing must be repaired before it becomes too cold. Roofs must be maintained before heavy rain. Tools must be ready before the busiest season. Animals must be cared for every day. You watch all of this happening around you, and gradually, you become involved. At first, your role is small. You carry. You fetch. You watch. You remind someone about something they asked you to remember. But now, adults expect you to notice things yourself. If the firewood pile is getting low, you should notice. If the chickens are wandering somewhere they should not, you should notice. If a basket is broken, you should notice. If younger children need watching, you should notice. This is a new kind of responsibility. Nobody is necessarily standing beside you giving instructions. You are expected to look around and think. That can feel strangely grown up. It can also be exhausting. Because once people know you are capable, they start asking you to do more. Congratulations. You have discovered the ancient curse of competence. The better you become at something, the more often people ask you to do it. Still, there are rewards. When you complete a task without help, an adult may simply nod. That small nod matters. You understand what it means. They trust you. Trust is valuable in your world. A household cannot function if nobody can rely on anyone else. And children gradually earn that trust through repeated actions. You arrive when asked. You return what you borrowed. You finish a task. You remember instructions. You take care of younger children. You do not waste food. You do not damage tools unnecessarily. Each action adds another small piece to your reputation. You may not think of it as reputation yet, but adults do. They notice which children are dependable. They notice which ones are careless. They notice who works hard. They notice who constantly disappears when chores begin. You are learning that your behavior is remembered. This becomes particularly important as you approach the years when work may become more serious. For some children, that means increasing involvement in agriculture. For others, it means household production. For others, it may mean an apprenticeship. The path depends on your family. If your parents farm, you learn more about farming. If your family keeps animals, you become more involved with them. If your family runs a workshop, you spend more time around the craft. If your family trades goods, you may learn the basics of buying, selling, measuring, and bargaining. Your future is often connected to the work already surrounding you. This does not mean you have no choices. People could change occupations. They could move. They could enter religious life. They could marry into different households. They could learn new trades. But your starting point matters. You are growing up inside an existing network of skills and relationships. Imagine spending a morning beside a farmer. The field is damp from overnight rain. Your feet sink slightly into the soil. An adult shows you where to step. You watch how the soil behaves. You learn that good farming requires patience. You cannot force a seed to grow faster by staring at it. You cannot demand that the weather cooperate. You can only prepare, plant, maintain, wait, and hope. This teaches you something deeper than agriculture. You begin understanding that medieval people live with uncertainty. Much of life depends on things beyond human control. Weather, disease, animal health, harvests, road conditions, prices, politics, conflict. You cannot control all of these. So preparation becomes a form of protection. You store what you can, repair what you can, save what you can. And when something goes wrong, you adapt. You learn this without anyone explaining it directly. Suppose rain damages part of a roof. Adults immediately begin making plans. Someone finds materials. Someone climbs up. Someone moves belongings. Someone checks whether water is getting inside. You watch. You may help carry a small object. The problem is not solved instantly, but the household responds. This is another lesson. Problems are not always disasters. Sometimes, they are simply problems that require work. You begin to develop that attitude too. A broken basket, repair it. A torn garment, patch it. A muddy path, find another route. A missing chicken, search. A difficult task, ask someone who knows. You are becoming practical. And practical thinking is one of the most useful forms of education you can receive. You also become more aware of time, not minutes and seconds in the modern sense. The medieval day is often experienced through natural rhythms, work routines, religious observances, and seasonal changes. You know when the sun is high. You know when the evening meal approaches. You know when church bells signal something important. You know when certain tasks must be completed before darkness. Darkness matters. After sunset, work becomes more difficult. Lighting is limited and fuel is not free. So the day has boundaries. You learn to work while there is enough light. You learn to finish certain tasks before evening. You learn that winter days feel different from summer days. The seasons shape your schedule. Summer brings long daylight. Winter brings long darkness. That affects everything. You may wake before sunrise because work needs to begin. You may return home after sunset when necessary. But often, the rhythm of the household follows the available light. This makes your childhood feel closely connected to nature. You cannot simply ignore the season. The season determines what is happening around you. In spring, fields demand attention. In summer, work intensifies. In autumn, harvesting and storage become urgent. In winter, outdoor work may slow in some places while indoor work becomes more important. You are learning the calendar through experience. You may not know every formal date, but you know what season it is because the world looks different. The trees tell you. The fields tell you. The animals tell you. The weather tells you. Even food tells you. And eventually, you begin anticipating what comes next. That is another sign you are growing. You are no longer simply responding to instructions. You are predicting. You see the season changing and understand what work is approaching. You notice the storage supply shrinking and realize more food will need to be prepared. You see a tool becoming worn and know it will need repair. You hear adults discussing an upcoming event and understand that extra work will be required. Your mind is becoming part of the household's planning. That is a major transition. You are still a child, but you are beginning to think like someone responsible for things. And perhaps the most important thing you are learning is that survival is rarely about one heroic moment. It is about hundreds of ordinary actions performed correctly. Feed the animals, store the grain, repair the roof, carry the water, mend the clothing, prepare the food, watch the children, check the tools, repeat. The repetition may sound boring, but it is what keeps the household functioning. And now you are one of the people helping to keep that rhythm going. You finish your work near sunset. The sky is turning pale gold. You carry the last small bundle toward home. The village smells of smoke and cooked food. Someone is calling animals back toward a stable. Children are finishing their games. Adults are closing up workshops. For a moment, everything seems peaceful. You look at the familiar cottages. The same paths. The same fields. The same people. But you are not quite the same child who first walked these paths. You know more. You can do more. And people expect more from you. Tomorrow will bring another task, another lesson, another small step toward the adult world. For now, though, you can sit beside the hearth, eat your evening meal, and let the quiet sounds of the village settle around you. The work can wait until morning.